Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is inside the DAT Convoy Platform Deal, what this acquisition means for the freight market with Bill Driegert. How's it going, Bill?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Bill, I'm excited to talk to you about this topic. And I've told you before you hit the record button, I'm excited to talk to you. And I've been connected to you on LinkedIn. I've kind of followed you from afar, and I'm finally getting to talk to you. So, Bill, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Yeah, so I am Bill Driegert, the EVP of Convoy Platform at DAT. I'm calling from Tiburon, California, which is just north of San Francisco if you go over the Golden Gate and keep going a little bit. And I've been in this freight industry since 2006 when I came on as fourth employee at Coyote Logistics. And most of my career has been focused on like technology and brokerage and operations and trucking all coming together.
Yep. So tell us, what is DAT and what is Convoy Platform? And tell us about that. I mean, I think everybody who's listening says, of course, I know what DAT is, and I also know about Convoy, but what is Convoy Platform and what is DAT? What do they do and who do they serve?
Yeah, DAT is a technology company that primarily serves brokerages and carriers. And the product for which they are most known is the marketplace, the load board. Almost penetration is pretty high across the market. So most carriers and most brokers, if I'm a broker and I need to find a new carrier and source capacity, I can post my load and I get inbounds from carriers, or I can book it directly through the platform. And conversely, carriers go to DAT1 to find freight from brokers and some shippers that post on as well. But primarily it's a broker and carrier marketplace. And DAT also has incredible rate data. So we have products around rates and rate IQ and a whole suite of capabilities around that as well.
Yep. And so what is Convoy Platform?
Yeah. Convoy Platform is the technology platform that came out of Convoy. So the Convoy story is Convoy was founded in 2015, was part of the huge wave of VC investment that came around that time, competed heavily against Uber Freight, which of course I'm very familiar with because I founded that and was going head to head with Convoy. So Convoy and Uber Freight really defined what became known as the digital freight marketplaces or DFM providers, or digital freight matching, as people would call it. Those companies really brought to market what ultimately became an app-centric way of doing business for carriers. Where it really shifted the market was with owner-operators and small carriers who all of a sudden could download an app, hit a button, book a load, change their whole way of going to market. And what ultimately happened, though, is Uber Freight made some acquisitions, acquired Transplace, became a very different company. Convoy, unfortunately, wound down in October of 2023 after having had $1 billion in investment in building this platform out. And I think there's a lot of reasons and stories around why that happened. But I think a big part of it is for that, it was a tech company with incredible investment in tech. But to support that level of tech investment, you also needed a massive operation on the other side. And it's hard to do both at the same time. And that's why when we acquired the tech, so I was at Flexport when we acquired the technology after that all wound down, decided to relaunch it purely as a tech platform that we would bring to market for brokers and carriers. And that is ultimately what DAT acquired. What Convoy allows for, and the beauty of that is all that investment that they spent building it out in a brokerage to be a digital brokerage, to be a fully automated brokerage, now is available to any broker and any carrier.
Yeah, it changes everything. And we'll get into more of the details of that in a second. But, I don't ever want to give short shrift to the intelligence that I get from DAT. So I used it when I was at a 3PL. My team used it when we could not find truckers for a lane. And that was kind of my sense of it is, hey, we used this tool. We loved it. No complaints. Years later, when I was advising large shippers and I was like $100 million spend, they don't want to just talk about, hey, can you save $50 on the next load? They want to understand, what is the freight market doing? Are we overpaying in general or underpaying in general? And when by the time you're that size, nobody's looking for transactional solutions. It was managed solutions. And I remember when I left the company, they left the engagement, I remember saying this, before I go, I want to make sure we have the DAT trend line on your freight, what the market would pay. And I remember having a meeting about it, and they said, should it be higher or lower? I said, just as long as it's running parallel. I just want to make sure I'm not
Yeah.
wildly overpaying for something. And if the market spikes up, I don't want to find out that am I paying extra to my transportation company, or am I paying extra to the trucking companies? That intelligence is second to none. And by the way, I talked to Jason Miller a lot from Michigan State. I know he loves your data. He references it when we talk.
Yeah. Well, and Ken Adama at DAT is very much out there and talks about it quite a bit. But this is this is key. Having been on the other side of it, what happened during the pandemic was a lot of shippers, because rates were so volatile, right? To your point, like the market's going to move, and shippers, it's less that am I like, if the market's going up, yes, I'm going to pay more, but am I paying to market or under market, and am I tracking the market? Am I managing this effectively as best as I could? Which is really a question of like, yes, I need a independent source that's going to tell me where the market's at. And there's no better, more reliable source, more trusted source than DAT. And most of these shippers or brokers that integrate carriers that get into index-based pricing models, as an example, it's DAT who they're looking for that data, because that's the trusted benchmark.
It's kind of almost the same as if you paid a financial planner to help you with your investments. And then at the end of the year, you say, well, what did the market do? What did, and Brennan, I might not be taking all the risk that the market is right now. He said, hey, look, you're a little more in bonds, or you're a little more in cash. That's why we didn't hit the market. Okay, just explain. Just tell me what's going on. And you can't do that unless you have data, and not a little bit of data, not data from that trucking company or from that 3PL.
No, you need the whole market view.
And I interviewed Ken Adamo not so long ago, and what is it? You guys have done $1 trillion of transactions. So I don't know how many zeros that I don't know how many zeros that is, but it's a lot. So anyway, Bill, tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined the juggernaut that is first Flexport and then DAT, or Dollar Trucker way back in the olden days.
Yeah, and I pinch myself being at DAT, because it is such a I think an ideal point along this journey, because I started. So I grew up in Dallas, Texas, a native Texan. My wife and I both went to the same high school in Richardson, which is just north of Dallas. I left Dallas originally to go to Georgia Tech, because my original career ambition was to be a race car engineer. So I went there to do mechanical engineering. I dropped out of school to start a race car fabrication shop and ran that for about 3 years. And that ended that career journey, though, realizing, this is one, I was very young. I needed to learn a lot more about running a business. And that was a very tough market to make money in. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to go back to school. I ended up finishing my undergrad at SMU in Dallas. And then while I was doing that, I started interning at Frito-Lay as part of Pepsi. And that's really what introduced me to operations and supply chain. And while I was there, I was building production planning, inventory planning models across their whole network. Ended up spending just a little over 6 years there. But in the middle, they sent me to get my grad degree at MIT. And it was a 1-year program. The Masters of, at the time it was called the Masters of Logistics. Now it's the Masters of Supply Chain. It's a great program there, but small cohort too. It's only there were 32 people in my cohort going through that class that year. One of the people in that cohort was Jeff Silver, who ultimately went on to found Coyote Logistics. And we made a connection, and that class ended in 2003. His non-compete ran out in 2006. April 2006, I had stayed in touch with him. He started Coyote, said, great, I'd love to join this journey with you. Came on as a 4th employee. And that was how I got sucked into freight brokerage and trucking. And at that point, we started that as a tech company. My focus up to that point had been almost all tech, and I'd done modeling and what would now be data science at Pepsi. I was doing operations research, building optimization engines. And so going there, started as a developer building out the Bazooka platform, and then played a lot of different business roles over time. Jeff was very much, you have to get on the floor, you got to go on sales calls. So learned the whole business very intensely, and was along for that whole ride. And then I left there to go to Amazon, a couple years at Amazon. That was a very productive couple years, though, because we were in the middle of building out the delivery network. So now Amazon has 1,000 delivery stations. I came on, we had one delivery station, helped launch the first 27 delivery stations. And that's a fun time to be in a project like that, because I can't imagine another company is going to come along and build another delivery network to rival UPS, FedEx, and now Amazon. But at the time, it was just an idea, and we got to iterate very quickly on the initial, like all the SOPs around sorting and what types of trucks and how to run the routes, and spent time on that. But then had the opportunity to launch the freight brokerage at Amazon. So when we launched Amazon Freight Exchange, which is now Amazon Freight, I had put that white paper through, because I had this, even back to Coyote, I had this vision for quite some time of a Uber Freight or a Convoy-like product, and thought Amazon was one place where it might make sense to do that, and launched Amazon Freight Exchange. Then left Amazon right at 2 years, because I love Amazon. It's a great company, but it's also a big engine. Wanted to get back into startup space. Came down to San Francisco. I was briefly with a company called Pillow Homes, which is short-term property management, but I got sucked out of that role because Uber acquired a company called Auto, which I had been advising. And in that transaction was the opportunity to start Uber Freight. And I came on as director of Uber Freight, and I was put in a corner to build out Uber Freight. And we were part of the autonomy team for the first 3 years. So I was kind of buried under multiple layers in the corner building out Uber Freight. And then autonomy all got sold off to Aurora. Uber Freight was clearly doing pretty well at the time, scaling rapidly. And I spent just under 8 years building that out. But Uber Freight, of course, made an acquisition of Transplace, became a very different company than, like, originally it was, again, just about building that automation, that Uber-like market within freight. And I had an opportunity then. Dave Clark from Amazon reached out and said, "Hey, I'm now the CEO of Flexport. Would you be interested in doing something similar here at Flexport?" That was an interesting journey. Flexport's gone through a transformation, and Ryan came back in about 6 months into my tenure there, which was, he was fantastic and brought all that founder energy back. But also at that point, it was like, okay, well, what's next for trucking? Fortuitously, this Convoy technology acquisition opportunity came in, where Convoy, unfortunately, ceased operations in October. We were able to make a deal within 24 hours to acquire just the tech, not the company, which hence why the Convoy platform, because the company effectively shut down.
I remember when that happened and people said, "Oh, this was fantastic technology." And I'm glad somebody bought it. And I remember somebody even speculating before it happened on LinkedIn saying, what's going to happen to all Convoy's tech? Because I think I interviewed a few times. I got the demo. They had arguably the best tech out there.
Yeah. And that's where I think being at Flexport is probably the only place where that could have happened, because a founder led, Ryan could make a decision. We had to make a decision in 24 hours. Ryan was on board. I, of course, had experience building out something very similar, so felt like I had a pretty good idea what to do with the tech. But yeah, it was. And then Dan was super supportive, because Dan Lewis, of course, he wanted to see the tech have another life. He wanted to see this carry forward, and he wanted to make sure it landed in safe hands. So, and he was very generous throughout the whole process, and after that, in terms of helping us direct what we did with it and how we took that forward. So yeah, we were able to close it, and then by February we relaunched it and pivoted it to be just a technology platform. And then DAT stepped in, and from the first phone call, I knew the logic made so much sense, because Convoy had spent $1 billion building out this technology, but it wasn't yet mature as a business. We were starting to scale very rapidly, and now that we're at DAT, it's kind of hit the afterburners. It's incredible, but that's exactly why it made so much sense. DAT has very mature market. The technology that Convoy brings to the table really solves the end-to-end transaction, brings a new level of automation and capability for brokers, And now we're plugging it into a very mature market. So it's already fully scaled. So you have a very mature product that didn't have a mature market yet, into a very mature marketplace that didn't have an equivalent product. And it just fits very well.
Yeah. By the way, before I forget, I just wrote it down. Pepsi, Amazon Coyote, Otto, Uber Freight, Flexport, and now DAT. Before you get too old, Bill, you need to sit down with a clean sheet of paper and write your thoughts. I mean, working with Jeff Silver and then recently Ryan Peterson. And I'm sure those other gentlemen that you work for who are at Uber and Otto hold their own pretty well too. But, as you were talking about that, I thought not so much anymore. But 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it was like, well, is he a logistics guy or is he a tech guy? And if somebody said, what about the Convoy guys? What are they? Well, they're definitely tech guys, but they got pretty good at logistics. And if you look kind of at a lot of companies, there's that, which are you? You're a hybrid. And you probably did it kicking and screaming early when Jeff said, so you got to go on a sales call. You're like, what?
Oh, I did, yeah. No. And when I left Pepsi, it was my boss like, you really want to go into like trucking? It's like yeah, sounds cool. I'll try it out.
I got to tell you, I'm from automotive, and I remember when I was the general manager, COO of a logistics company, and I remember people would call and say, "Hey, we got this new program. You'd be the program manager of this. Come back. It was one of the big three. Come back as a consultant. Come back as program as an outsourced program manager. We just come back." And I was like, "Oh man!" I was like, and one of the things that struck me about it, I always thought I'd go back, was this is a wide open space. And the guys over Yossi Sheffi said it to me. He goes, "This is the outdoor factory that spreads across the whole planet." And I was like, yeah. And it's a lot more challenging than the factories I came from. So
yeah, it's it's a fascinating space that lends itself to like technology. There's technology can do so much to solve these problems, and these problems in trucking can be incredibly complicated. But it's also, you just have it's a colorful space with a lot of messiness too, because it's real world and you've got to manage through that.
Oh yeah. And I always say this is one of those, if you look at companies like, the freight brokerages that are out there, they're working with Fortune 500 companies, but they're also working with mom and pop trucking companies. And you have to, obviously the cybersecurity has become more important. We'll probably touch on that before we end today, but freight fraud, all these other issues. And you go, yeah, this is the technology the bar just gets higher and higher and higher. And it's just happened so quickly. I've said this years ago. You probably experienced this too. You go to work and you go, oh, I work on this system that makes me, hit F8 to go to here. There's another, you go to the cost screen, Joe. I don't even know there is a cost screen. You got to hit F8 shift. It'll take you there. And then after a while, I would notice, hey, the technology I have at home on my computer and then eventually on my phone was so good. And somebody said to me, it's consumer grade. And now I feel like consumer grade technology is what we have at work because we won't tolerate anything less. After you use the Uber app or the Domino's app, and then you go, wait a sec, what do you mean I got some clunky screen that I have to go to? No extra steps, nothing that's not intuitive, no training required.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting in our space is that the adoption curves, for each of these segments, is very different. So, carriers they'll download an app and just start using it. So if it's a better experience, more seamless, you've got more freight, whatever makes it the product, the value prop better, you can convert drivers very quickly because there's no friction in that process, which is also why the consumer market is so hyper competitive because consumers will just download an app and use it. And so you have to meet a certain bar. And that's also why the Convoy app has been so successful is it is this consumer, very highly refined app from a carrier engagement. If you move up the chain, brokers are pretty quick to switch tech because it also is a very competitive space, and they're in the middle, so they're getting squeezed. So they're always looking for options, but it's also very sales driven. So you have some very conservative driven. I mean, it is still a relationship sales driven industry. So you do have some conservative activism and approach to tech among certain pockets, and you always face that in conversations. But then you move up to shippers, and they don't have a lot of extra capital. Their tech replacement cycles are very low. Typically, the transportation departments just don't have huge budgets to go invest in tech, and the tech is so complicated because it's integrated in the ERP that they tend to be the laggards in terms of new tech because there's just so many systematic constraints to push that. So it's interesting, like working in the space for so long in tech is like, it's actually where you can drive the change the fastest is like with the carriers and then the brokers and then the shippers. So,
yep. So let's get over to talk about DAT before the Convoy platform arrived. So we had DAT, which was a fantastic company. Again, they did $1 trillion in transactions. And then why was the Convoy Convoy platform such an important acquisition?
yeah, it's a very well-developed technology platform. Again, $1 billion of investment. And it's also one of those types of products that on the surface you may say, oh, it's just an app. I remember, because I was at Uber, I remember there would always be criticism of Uber, like, oh, well, it's such a simple product. We could develop this with there's, people saying we could develop it in a month over the weekend, that sort of thing. But there's so much refinement in all the pieces behind that takes significant investment to get to a working model. And by working model, I mean where carriers will actually manage their freight from end to end through the application. And it's kind of like we always give this analogy of Craigslist versus Amazon, of where like traditionally DAT is a little more like Craigslist, where it's posting and you go and most of the transaction happens offline. It's not quite accurate. There's certainly capabilities that have been integrated in, but Amazon, we understand to be, I hit a button and it shows up on my door, right? It's every part of that experience has been optimized. And even though the fundamental concept is still simple, like I hit a button, I pay, and it comes from a warehouse, like I can map out that in my head. Obviously, we know that the level of investment to make that work at Amazon is significant. And it takes a lot of refinement. And if any part of that process wasn't automated, it would immediately kind of throw us off kilter. If you can imagine, like you hit the button to buy it and it said, great, now you got to mail a check, right? Or you need to go do this. Like if there's an extra step in that process throughout, then it feels all of a sudden the magic is broken. And that's where Convoy really solved it end to end in terms of like the magic. And when Convoy was at scale, we had shippers that our OpEx per load was $10 to $15, as where the average in the space is 150 plus for a broker. So an order of magnitude difference. And that's for spot.
Whoa. So you said OpEx, which please explain, because I'm sure there's some brokers saying, I'm just a lowly salesman. Please explain, Bill.
Yeah, this is a fun conversation to get into with brokers because everybody has a different perception of how they track this. And is it marginal cost, or am I taking the total cost and dividing it out? But ultimately, the easiest way to conceptualize it that I always looked at was like look at a broker. You typically have like $1 million in revenue per employee, and on average, you're doing like if you take all the variable costs, the carrier sales, your FinOps in the back end, your account management, your sales, and you put all that together and divide it by the loads, it's typically the benchmark in the industry is like $155, right? That's the cost per load, which is why historically I've had to make such big margins, and why for a broker, like to break even on $1,000 load, you got to make a 15% margin. That number has been coming down. It's hugely variable by brokers because some brokers also they have great contacts at mid-market carriers where they maybe send the same carrier 10 loads every day and auto accept, and that just becomes that much easier. So there's huge variance, and there's also a huge variance based on the shippers, because shippers have very different requirements of how you engage or how you schedule. Some can be very difficult to schedule, and others can be very easy. So you might, in fact, in my experience in brokerage, even at an Uber Freight or Convoy, where you might have a very automated set of customers where you're paying $15, $30 per shipment, you still will have some where it's 250 just because they're difficult. So shippers have a big part of this as well. But from an automation, like it's really two sides of the market. So you have the account management shipper side, and then you have the procurement side. And why does procurement cost so much? Well, you typically have carrier commissions or carrier rep commissions. You may have offshore staff that's doing the tracking, and then you have to manage all these inbound calls. You're typically taking a lot of calls per execution. So there's cost to sourcing new carriers, particularly. It's like a Pareto, where most of your loads may be very low cost and easy, and maybe your median load only costs $40, but your top 10% loads cost $300 to $500 per, just because they're very difficult to cover. You have bigger spreads for your commission, whatever happens. So this is where these sorts of models just automate all of that. They automate the carrier sourcing, the bidding process, the negotiation, the booking process, the vetting process. You can fully automate the vetting process, but brokers have different rules around that. Some of them want to be manual. All the tracking is automated. So, that's the other cost, right? You're calling a carrier. Are you there? Right. If you got a very high touch shipper, you may be calling them every 2 hours, even if you got ELDs and all the other integrations, right? So, but tracking is an area where there's been heavy investment over the last 10 years. So that's more automated. But then you have the payment side, right? So you have doc review, which is a manual process. If you have shortages or any issues to resolve, that's a manual process, which can snowball. And yeah, payment and invoicing and all the rest.
So through Convoy, because they have created so many automations. And by the way, I interviewed them way back during the pandemic a few times. And I remember them saying, hey, if we find a problem, we put a person on it. But we also, as we put that person on it, we're paying close attention to how can this be automated eventually. So they were kind of a people first, tech solution second. So it wasn't developing technology and saying, Bill, Joe, you have to fit within it. They were saying, let's do the job for a little while. So it was a smart way to do the design. And I think, before we hit the record button, we're talking about the tech versus people. And it's obviously going to be both. But using that technology, so you've used the Convoy platform within Flexport. It's 1/10 the cost per load using the Convoy platform software.
Yeah, that's like the golden use case. So it will go up.
Okay, so yeah, they'll be higher. Yeah,
yeah, because it can depend on, again.
But directionally, it kind of doesn't matter if it's 20% of that. It's still a fantastic deal.
Yeah. And where it typically goes up again is if at broker by broker, when they use it, they may have different processes around it and different system capabilities, which may constrain that. And then also, like I said, the shipper's requirements often may constrain that in terms of rescheduling or scheduling or other needs around that, reporting capabilities, et cetera. But yes, like if you go hands off, the carrier, and there's no issues, right? Because obviously exception management, some of that can be automated, like carriers can bounce themselves off the platform. Some of it, though, you'll still have to intervene. I mean, ultimately, if you need to go, if a carrier breaks down, right, it's the same. There's only so much you can automate, right? So at some point, you have to have the ability to intervene. But yes, all of the process from sourcing, which is typically a big bucket of the cost, particularly for last minute loads, right? Sourcing cost, bidding and negotiation, sending the rate con, every step of that process, and this is where all that investment went in, is every step of that process can be automated. And so the majority of the loads moving through the platform have no touch whatsoever from a interaction. And if they do have a touch, it's often brokers making a decision to do that, or some gap in either the systems or.
Well, I think we all still want to be able to say, I have the guy who used to be spending a lot of time tracking and, maybe even doing clerk work, pulling it from one system and adding it to another. We're no longer have that. What we're hoping to say is now I can look at the analytics. I can say, hey, Bill, can we meet once a week to talk about ways we can save you some money? Those are still going to be human conversations for the short run.
Yeah, it's also just there's a comfort, like it's a new technology, a new way of doing business, and we of course invested heavily in like fraud elimination and want to make sure that people trust the drivers on that platform. But if I'm a broker, a new carrier, my instinct is I want to talk to this person. Like I want to have some intuition. So even if the system should be able to automate it, sometimes I still want to call them, and until I'm comfortable. And then once I'm comfortable, maybe over time I'll stop making as many calls. But day one, I'm going to call them. It's perfectly reasonable.
I don't move freight, so this is easy for me to kind of say it from the cheap seats over here. But my sense is if I was bringing on a new carrier, I probably still want to pick up the phone and say, welcome aboard. And also, by the way, I just sent you an email. Did you get it? I believe all my freight fraud stuff, but having a conversation with somebody, nice freight fraud addition.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I mean, brokers are very pragmatic and ultimately they live or die by the service they provide to their shippers. And it is a incredibly service driven business. So of course they're not going to, they're going to take a conservative approach and make sure they verify and get comfortable and understand something before they let go or back off a bit.
Oh yeah, for sure. So let's talk about the impact on. So there's a lot of freight brokerages, they're your customers, and what changes with this big acquisition of the Convoy platform? What changes with your broker customers?
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap. So all the brokers that we had were DAT customers already, which is great. So as we go forward, of course, there's going to be a lot of we're working through those roadmaps in terms of how all these things come together. We're less than 30 days into this, so it's still very early. But I can say right out of the gate, it's versus it being you're signing with a different company. It's just an addenda. And our expectation is this just becomes part of the package. But as we sign those addendas and as we bring brokers on, there is an integration. So we're also partnering with TMS partners to do native integrations with all the major TMS vendors. We recently launched with Port TMS, and that's we're seeing a lot of acceleration on that. We've announced we're working on a totally native integration with Ascend, which will be a great, that one I'm very excited about because it's long tail. Their average broker tends to be smaller. And for us to access those brokers, we need a partner like Ascend that will have a fully native integration. It's going to be it's a unique set of capabilities for their broker set, which I'm excited about. And most of the large TMSs we're working with, but that's part of our parallel process because DAT just made acquisitions with us, with Outgo, with Trucker Tools. It's a very exciting time as all these things come together. But as we go forward, it's okay. What does this all look like as a complete package? They're very complementary. There's not a broker that I think can exist without using DAT in some way because there's so much. It's the largest marketplace, and the pricing capabilities. But add on top of that, then all the automation and the trust that comes by using the Convoy platform. But not all loads from a broker will be automatable. And there's always going to be a place. They're complementary, right? Just as if you think about consumer marketplaces, you use them in different ways, and it's not that they fully replace each other, right? So
let me make sure I understand how this works. So would you consider Convoy platform like a transportation management system, or is it more kind of the ERP or whatever you would want to call it for running a brokerage?
It's something else in that we definitely are not a TMS. We partner with TMSs. And the way I've always described it is more of an execution layer where we manage it's end-to-end execution from a load level. And the easiest way to conceptualize it is really from the carrier side, where if I'm a carrier, that's where it's easy to understand why it's distinct and unique. And also where a lot of the other providers don't compete with it, because most providers are not in the hands of the carriers. And so, and again, when I say carrier, I primarily mean small carriers. That's the main market for Convoy platform today. It's small carriers that can use the application and make independent decisions. Because from a carrier perspective, I download the app, I'm booking load, I'm managing it from end to end, and all that is just automatically going back to the broker. So from the TMS experience from a broker, it should be totally seamless. So when it's a native integration, it's like just think of Convoy platform as like another carrier rep that's pulling loads off the board. It's tracking the loads. It's taking accountability for vetting the carrier. It's just managing everything that a carrier rep would in that sense, but for your owner operators, which is typically in small carriers, which is typically the more difficult pool of capacity to manage at scale, which is why it's such kind of a unique value prop.
So Convoy was never wrong way for that. Convoy Platform has never had like a customer facing solution. This was always for their customers for their internal customers to use.
That's, I'd say, largely right, but of course, Convoy was a broker. So Convoy did have customer-facing tech, but we did not turn that technology on. We did have a brief period where we were pursuing shippers. Flexport does have one shipper using the Convoy platform technology, but we pivoted away from that fully. But when we first brought the tech, yeah, there was a set of shippers that were like, great, I want to turn this back on. It was a hard decision to say, hey, we're not going to turn all the shippers back on. We're going to focus on brokers. But
I think this is very exciting because it's hard to get people, I know they do, to change transportation management systems. Because the biggest, you might have, if you're talking some brokers, they might have millions of transactions in there. So the idea that I'm going to switch and work with somebody else, but even the smaller guys, I've experienced that. Changing transportation management systems is really painful, but adding that execution layer, so all of a sudden
this is complementary
I am much more
to the TMS.
efficient. So as you said, it's an execution layer. I love that. And so this is suddenly making me much more efficient as soon as I sign up.
Yep, exactly. And we've made it as easy as possible because there were maybe a cost on the broker side to do the integration from their end, but the integrations can happen in as quick as a week. It's all, like, particularly with the native TMSs, it's all standardized, but there's no cost. Like, we don't charge to turn it on. We don't charge subscription. We only charge if a broker posts a load and that load actually delivers, so that we've actually driven value. And that was a very conscious decision. So if you think of it then too, with these things coming together, brokers have a DAT subscription. They say, great, you know what? I want to try Convoy Platform. I turn it on. There's no extra cost until they start seeing loads get booked. And they set the prices. So they should only be booking if those are prices that they believe they're covering whatever that fee might be, as well as getting a competitive price. So we've tried to make it very value driven in that sense, where if you use it and you're booking loads, it's a transactional cost, and you're getting value when it books. So
yep. So most brokers are already working with you guys for the load board and for the intelligence, the data, and now they can work with you to become much more efficient. That execution layer, and I'm assuming much safer. I think at that point, freight fraud is a concern, but also cargo theft. I mean, and I think they're first cousins, but I'll throw something out there that concerns me even more is cybersecurity. I think, Bill, if you and I were today in a Fortune 500 company and we're responsible for picking people to work with, cybersecurity would be one of our top concerns. And I think, I say this all the time on my podcast, I'm like a broken record, but think we could experience a cyber 9/11, a digital 9/11 that makes everybody the next day say, who am I partnering with? And I want to work with somebody who can make the investments and already made the investments in that security.
Yeah, which it's a good point, because it does require a scaled level of capability. And Convoy obviously made significant investments in that area. Our team there and our platform team is exceptional. And DAT, of course, as well, as a tech company, has top tier talent and capabilities. Yeah.
Oh, I've interviewed them about cybersecurity in the past, so I know, and I saw them at the cybersecurity conference last fall down in Cleveland. Yeah, they've made those investments, and by the way, any big company that's in the tech business can make those investments. The nature of our business is we do have smaller companies, and I've said this to people before. The challenge is we have worked with a lot of mom and pop trucking companies, and God bless them, they've spent on the ultimate technology, a truck. We have to help them work safely and securely with companies all over this great country of ours, and we have to do it safely. And I think we're the do it, but we're also the barrier, right?
You had started to touch on the fraud piece, which like that's another area where Convoy invested quite significantly, and I think I know has market leading capabilities in terms of fraud reduction. And that's an area too where for DAT, there's like our teams are now coming together because there's new products coming to market on the DAT side as well to manage fraud and to do the carrier vetting. And what's really unique with the Convoy approach is that it starts with the app, and we have full visibility of how that driver's behaving within the app, which gives us just a lot more data.
How many people have your app downloaded?
Total downloads. So the number prior to Convoy winding down was 400,000 drivers had downloaded the app, and that was across 80,000 carriers. Since we relaunched, we've had about, I think we're 35 to 37,000 carriers turn the app back on and search for loads. And what happens though in a marketplace is that if we have a load in hand, drivers will typically re-engage. And so it's more, do we have the information? That's where it's so interesting across the entire DAT and Trucker Tools network, because I'd say penetration across that full network with carriers is very, very high.
Right, that's what I was getting at. That's what I'm getting at. So years ago, I heard Mark Cuban talk about this, and he goes, I love the idea of an app. And he said, but how many apps do you use every single day? And then he said that his team had done some research on apps, and he said there's app fatigue, and I think there's app fatigue in our business. So if somebody says, "Oh, hey, we got this brand new load board, and you should download our app," you're like, I already got an app downloaded that I've been working with a company for a long time. That would be you guys, that has more freight than everybody else. And also, as soon as you throw in this added level of safety, why am I working? I just speak for myself. My phone is probably 18 months old, maybe 2 years old. I don't know. I don't want to replace it. So I don't want to add any more hassle to my phone, because I don't want to take that few days off where you're messing with a new phone. Drivers have enough hassle without downloading your new app that'll get them one load every 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, definitely marketplace density is critical. You have to be able to log in and see a load. That's one of the hardest things about building a marketplace. I do think that beyond that, I don't think there's a ton of app fatigue in the sense of, if drivers, there are app-centric drivers now that have a whole different experience. And if you look at where they can find loads efficiently, they're going to go to DAT, they're going to go to us, they're going to go to the Uber Freights and the CH Robinsons and the TQLs and the Amazons and the Walmarts now, right? And these are the places where they know that they've got a good. And so if they've got 10 of those and they can find a load.
Well, can they put those on their ELDs?
You mean have the ELD provide?
I'm just wondering, because I'm wondering how much I would even put on my phone, but I'm not a driver.
Yeah, I mean, I think the phone is the universal, like.
Yeah. So anyway, the freight brokerages that you're already working with, are they already starting using this execution layer that you guys brought on?
Yeah. So we've been scaling pretty rapidly right before the acquisition, and then since then it's kind of gone. Afterburners have turned on, so we've been signing at a pretty steady rate.
Yep. So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about. Let's talk about the truckers real quick. What advantage is this for the truckers who will work with DAT, and now they work with the Convoy platform also?
Yeah, from a carrier perspective, it's a easier way of managing the freight from end to end. And if you put yourself in the carrier's position, like they can go to DAT and get broader coverage of loads and find new brokers and new opportunities. If they go to Convoy Platform, they can execute all that within the platform as well. So for the loads that are on the platform, I can bid, I can accept, I can track it, I can manage it. I know what I'm going to get paid, and I know that I'm going to get paid because we manage the payments through the platform. And so there's no sorts, like all the, there's no dummy loads, there's no fake loads, right? Because it's all tightly coupled in terms of execution through payment. It just makes it much cleaner. And again, that's that Amazon-like experience where I know every step of that process has been highly refined. And so for a carrier, that just makes it easier. And if I am like I said, there's a lot of owner operator small carriers that are very app centric now in terms of how they think about going to market. It's really improved their quality of life and their flexibility. One thing that we see as an example is 30% of freight gets booked outside of normal business hours. So if it's Tuesday and I'm at the truck stop, 8 p.m., getting dinner, I can just book a load for tomorrow. Is where if I go and I find that load on DAT, I don't know, the broker may or may not pick up the phone if I start calling it at 8 p.m. Now, there's always brokers that are like hardcore and they're going to pick up the phone and they're going to get you booked. But if I can just book it through the app, and that now is connected to that same broker, well, it also has simplified it for them as well, because now that whole process has been automated.
Right. And I think, Bill, I always think about drivers on the road. So you delivered late, or they unloaded you late, and now you missed your pickup that was just down the street. But I still want to pick something up tonight to head home. And, for a long time, we've had a driver sitting waiting for a load, not knowing where it was going to come from, or have to drive 50 miles to go pick it up. And meanwhile, there was another truck that, was needed, and we just didn't have it all connected. More and more, we're getting to the place where it's like that driver should be able to go, depending where he's at or where she's at, and say, yep, I missed my load. I got a new one. I'm okay.
We have all sorts of examples of these magical moments where a driver bounces off a load, it gets reposted to the platform, it gets rebooked in 15 minutes, and the next driver still shows up on time. And we have examples of that happening at 10 p.m. and at 4 a.m., right? And that just can't happen without the tech just compressing that whole process. And from a driver, yeah, it's like drivers are front line. They're going 24/7. So we have loads get booked at 3 a.m. And because you can imagine, like you had a long day, you delivered at 2 a.m., you find out your load. It's Saturday night, you find out your load Monday back is canceled. What do you do, right?
So let me ask you a question. Let's just say somebody's listening today and they said, hey, I'm thinking of starting my own freight brokerage. Could I start a freight brokerage using just the tools that you guys have available?
I think they are critical pieces of the future broker's toolkit, absolutely. And I think that's what I'm most excited about over the next 5 years is brokers will be going to market and thinking about this market very differently, in the sense of, if I'm a broker today, if I was starting a broker today, what would I focus on? Well, I would definitely want to get the absolute top tier sales and AM teams, because the shipper relationship is still going to be critical, and being able to solution with those shippers is going to be critical. I would want a top tier carrier sales team, but I would focus them on mid-sized carriers and large carriers, build those relationships. Let's work with them. Let's co-solve these problems. Let's be the conduit. And then I'm going to use this technology to solve the combination of DAT and Convoy will solve my long tail capacity needs. It will allow me to automate a significant chunk of that business. It will always give me a market signal and allow me to go to market for any load against this pool of very high quality capacity. And I will always have last minute options available, knowing that I have DAT as a marketplace and that I can get that broad coverage when I need it. And how people balance those things, I think it's going to be case by case. Everybody's going to have a different set of solutions. But certainly, if I'm building a broker today, I see this too. Like, the fun part of engaging with these brokers is there's absolutely brokers that are, even in this bear market, scaling quite aggressively. And I think the common pattern with those brokers is they're very proactive. They're trying new things. They're very focused on getting their OpEx down, but also finding new capacity solutions and still being super sales driven. Like, all the fundamentals still apply.
I was talking to Kevin Hill the other day from Brush Pass Research. So he tracks all the freight brokerages, and he's going to come back on and talk about freight brokerages in the coming week. But I asked him, what is the margins right now? And he goes, I think around 12%. And he said they were like 14, 16%. And then the dollar amounts are down a little bit too. And so I'm thinking there's a lot of people listening, or might be freight brokers, who say, hey, I've got to find a way to do more with less. I mean, obviously, that's a kind of a mantra of our business these days. And this is one of the ways to do it. This is a way to not only be faster, better, faster, cheaper, but also better because the safety is there and the dependability is there, that you got this execution layer that you didn't have before.
Yeah, that's right. And also the quality in terms of on time and information visibility and tracking resolution is all very high. And I would just add that the owner operators often get a bad rap because historically that's the vector by which you've had a lot of fraud. But the good operators and the good owner operators are some of the best carriers in the market because they're small business owners and the loads matter to them and every load matters. And so once you kind of weed out the bad actors, you're left with a pool that is absolutely top tier.
Oh yeah, and is that's still where am I right to say the majority of the volume in our space is still in that long tail of carriers?
It's about 40% of the capacity.
Yeah, so it's a part of the market that you can't ignore, and super important. Anyway, I'm going past my time with you here, Bill. So let me wrap. Oh, but before I forget, if somebody's listening and say, "Hey, what about payments and factoring?" How does that fit into this equation?
Yeah, so we pay the carriers, and the carriers have optionality on quick pay options. Carriers can also we'll pay the factors if they use a factor, and that's their preferred payment method. So factors send us the LOAs. So we support either option, and carrier can select their own payment terms there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Anyway, enough of my blather. Let me summarize what we talked about. So I'm talking to my friend Bill Driegert, and we're talking about inside the DAT-Convoy platform deal, what this acquisition means for the freight market, and it means a lot. I think we've seen over the last few years freight fraud be a big issue, and so there's all sorts of sourcing solutions that are out there, and I'm sure they're all fine. There's also been a whole bunch of new solutions for how do I use more the same carriers more often, and I think that we're all kind of looking for the same thing, which is I got to do this faster. I have to do it better. I have to do it cheaper. I want to work with the same carriers on a regular basis. I have to worry about freight fraud, cargo theft. And meanwhile, I got to do it with less margin. So which means somehow I've got to get a solution. And by the way, I'll say it's beyond a solution with DAT and Convoy Platform. This is a partnership, and I think it's a really important partnership. And I love that you guys connect through their transportation management system. So I don't have to upend my business and say, "Yep, I'm taking a big risk and upsetting my customers for a few weeks to move to another system." No, this is a relatively easy integration, I take it?
Yep. Can be as quick as a week if the TMS is already supporting the native integration.
Hallelujah. Also good for truckers. This has always been a great way for truckers, and it gets you access to a big chunk of the truckers that you wouldn't otherwise have. It's that long tail capacity, as you said, needs. And obviously, freight fraud, cargo theft, cybersecurity being super important and a big important. And I've done interviews with DAT in the past. I know how important that stuff is to you guys. Anyway, put a big old bow on this one, Bill. Final thoughts on the topic.
I appreciate the time today. It's an exciting time in freight tech generally, and bringing Convoy Platform together with DAT is it's definitely going to drive a lot of efficiencies for brokers and carriers. And I think over the next 2 years, you're just going to see all new operating models and creative ways that brokers are solving these problems in the market. And I think I look forward to helping them do that.
So, Bill, what conferences will we see you and the fine folks? Well, first off, I'll just ask, what conferences are you going to between now and the end of the year? I know I'll see you at Manifest in February.
Yeah, Manifest, CSCMP, F3. I'll be hitting all those conferences up. And then for DAT and Convoy Platform generally, we will be at the TIA conferences. We'll be at the broker carrier summits. We'll be out at MATS. We'll be hitting every event we can. Yeah.
Georgia sent us a list here, so I saw the Werner Carrier Connections and Plus Product Days. That was in August, so we're a little late for that one. It's August 20th, so you're not going that one. Jubit's Driver Appreciation Day. I don't even know what that is, but you guys will be there.
Jubit's is the family that founded DAT. So Yeah, that's a
Oh,
that's a
all
DAT
right, all
event. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's great royalty, but they're kind of flying under the radar there. All right, fantastic. I see you'll be at the Thai User Conference. That's September 10th through the 12th. The McLeod User Conference, September 21st through the 23rd.
Yeah, TMS partnerships with those so yeah.
Yep. Then there's NASCES. I don't even NASCES. I don't know that one.
I'm not super familiar with that one. Gotta look
It's
it up.
so it's September 22nd to 24th. You should be there, and it's NASCES. Anyway, someone from. By the way, you can't go to a conference where you don't see DAT at that conference. So I'm sure we'll see you guys there. The England Agent Conference, September 30th. TIA Technovations. I'm not going to get there this year, but I love it. That's in November 5th through the 7th. And then WIT Accelerate Conference.
Women in trucking. Yeah, women in trucking.
Oh, yes. I should interview them. I've had them on the past. But all right. Yep. Important. I am going, let's see, I'm going to CSCMP. I'm going to the Broker Carrier Summit. I'm going to IANA, which is the Intermodal Association of North America. I'm also going to the I'm going to screw this one up. Association for Logistics and Supply Chain. That's in Detroit area. I'll be at a lot of conferences between it. I'm going to the Trimble conference. I don't want to miss that one either. Anyway, enough of my blather. Bill, thank you so much for taking the time. I love what you guys are doing. I love how you're doing it. I always thought of DAT as this juggernaut, and then sometimes you see big companies, especially old companies that are, kind of have this established way of doing business. They don't make big moves like this. And this is kind of earth shattering. I mean, I saw the comments on LinkedIn. Everyone's like, what the hell? And I mean, it's fantastic. I'm glad you came on to explain why it's so important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a once in a career type of opportunity to bring these sorts of companies together. So it was a moment in time. It's very exciting.
That means a lot from you, Bill, because you've had quite the career so far. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.